Hello everybody, welcome to the Daily Sip. My name is Oliver. My mission is to bring you closer to organic Japanese green tea, and today we're gonna dive into a very interesting tea. It is actually a post-fermented tea. So some of you might know when we talk about tea, we talk about the tea plant Camellia sinensis, and there out of this tea plant we can have different categories of teas. Mainly we talk about 6 categories of tea. So we have white tea, yellow tea, oolong tea, red tea or black tea, green tea, and then we have the post-fermented or dark tea. So we talk here really about the post-fermented and the dark tea, and here this is interesting for us because in Japan normally the dark teas or the post-fermented teas are not known. When we talk about post-fermented teas, one tea type always comes to mind, and some of you tea addicts also already know it, and this is the Puerh tea. So this is a Chinese tea, a post-fermented tea, but there also exists actually the rose Nadeshiko or Nadeshiko. In terms of its way of being in Japan, it is a post-fermented tea. So it is also a Puerh-like tea, you might say so, if you take Puerh as the category leader in this category, which is in Japan very small. It is mostly overlooked when you talk about Japan. When you talk about Japanese tea, then you're mostly talking about the green teas, the matchas. These are the main notes, the senchas, the gyokuros maybe if you're a little bit more into tea. But the Nadeshiko is actually a post-fermented tea that exists since quite a lot of time, and it is part of the tea culture in Japan, but as I said before, on a very small scale. So when we talk about the similarities to Puerh, definitely it is a post-fermented tea, definitely is a tea that is actually done in a similar way. Meanwhile, the Puerh is mostly uncontrolled post-fermented, if you might say so. The rose Nadeshiko is actually under a lot of control. So it is said that after the production of the tea, so then we talk about the harvesting, then we talk about the drying of the leaves and just the production. So we have first step, the steam bath. Then we have the machines which bring out the moisture out of the leaves, and then in the end we have the small heating process where the leaves are dried. Then the leaves are actually taken and they are put on the kind of a bed of leaves. Moisture is a little bit applied, and then actually what is interesting about the rose Nadeshiko is actually that the similar similar way of the production of sake, the production of miso soup or the production of soy, there actually the koji, so-called koji, is applied. This is either cooked rice or it can be cooked soybeans. And there is induced actually a fermentation process into this, and then the tea is actually fermented over time, but under a very strong guidance, because in Japan we want to make sure when we produce the Nadeshiko that actually no other fermentation possibilities are coming onto the tea to really control very, very well the fermentation of this tea. So with that said, we are getting leaves that are actually quite dark. So when we look at the leaves themselves of the rose Nadeshiko, it looks quite similar to hojicha, so a roasted tea, which you see sometimes in Japan. So roasted tea, very similar. At the end of the production, the tea leaves are not dried, but they're heated up after the drying process, so they can then become this kind of brown nearly, and getting a little bit this chocolatey flavor, this darker flavors, very coffee similar flavors, which we get from the roasted teas. And this one here looks very similar, but now I'm curious how actually the taste is of this tea. So let's dive into it. When we take 5 grams of this tea, So Mr. Takada, who is the farmer of this tea, he actually told us that you can brew this at 60 degrees Celsius. What I'll do today is I use 70 degrees Celsius, which is around 165 Fahrenheit for the Americans. And I'm gonna apply around 6 to 8 ounces of water, around 150 milliliters. I'm just gonna leave it in for more or less 1 minute, and then I'll have a perfect brew of this tea. So already when I smell it, it's different to the hojicha, so it's different to the roasted teas. Definitely a super interesting smell, but I'm much more interested how the taste is. So as I said before, 5 grams, you just leave it in for 1 minute. I'm not really patient today, so I guess I take it a little bit earlier. Good. So you can see already the liquid is super different. So let's put it here. So you see the liquid, it looks a little bit like a roasted tea, but at the same time it looks a little bit milky at the same time. I don't know if you see this here on the camera. I see it very, very well. So there's kind of a milkiness with the tea at the same time as it looks like a roasted tea. So super interesting in terms of liquid. And when we go on the name of this tea, sometimes it's called pink tea, sometimes it's called rosé of tea. So it comes a little bit to the name because it's not as dark, not as strongly strongly going into the brownish color like the hojicha, so the roasted teas in Japan, but there's kind of a small shimmer of rose, a little bit pink, so it's quite an interesting color. But what the most important now is, for me at least, is the taste. So let's have a taste of this tea. Maybe smell the leaves first. Goes a little bit, quite a bit in the direction of a hojicha actually. So it smells a little bit roasted, but there's kind of a more of a flowery note to it. So let's see in terms of taste. Wow. So it has actually this full body, this richness of a green tea. It has a lot of body, so super interesting. It has a little bit kind of this this darker, earthier tone. So it's kind of a mix for me in the first place. It's kind of a mix when I could imagine when you put bancha together, so the kind of more mature, a little bit older leaf tea, everyday tea in Japan, and you mix it with the roasted tea, so the hojicha, and you put it together. So I get a little bit this kind of earthy, more wooden flavor from the bancha. It's a slight roasty note, nearly kind of roasted nut notes. But at the same time, it's super, super flowery. So I get a little bit this slight taste of a kind of a darker fermented oolong. So you have a lot, it's very complex as you can see, the taste. It is definitely more earthy, but it has this flowery sweetness with it. So you need to like this earthy tone. So the ones who might have a lot of experience in Puerh, this might not be too kind of strong in this dark earth notes for you. But it definitely goes in this direction. At the same time, it has a little bit this floweriness of a oolong as well. So super interesting at the same time. So it's a little bit earthy and sweet, flowery. So quite a broad spectrum in terms of taste. And full bodied is really, really rich because, in my opinion, sometimes when you drink a hojicha has a little bit the tendency of, due to the fact that it is a roasted tea, it loses a little bit kind of in its rich body, but it's much more kind of on the taste. It's pushing forward, it's pushing into these dark notes. And here we have a push in this kind of darker earthy notes, but at the same time the body of the tea is super interesting. It nearly reminds me a little bit of a gyokuro, which is really kind of a denser liquid. This you get here too. Now I'm curious, the second brewing. Second brewing, always short, so you can do it just for... Oops. Swirled the teapot a little bit too much. You can see already in the second brewing here as well, very beautiful. Also the second brewing. So, still I have this kind of rose hint. Yeah. Now it gets a little bit more chocolatey, it's nice. So it loses a little bit in its floweriness, but it gets a little bit more chocolatey, more dark, more earthy. Yeah. But really interesting tea, so it's super different to what I had. It's kind of a mix of many things together, which I know from the Japanese tea. I have a little bit of bancha in there with the kind of wooden darker notes. When we go to dark notes, we also have a little bit of hojicha, but at the same time a little bit the flowery of the oolong. So super interesting. Post-fermented tea, Rose Nadeshiko. So we put the link below so you can check out a little bit more about this tea, the description, read the description. And yeah, if you want to dive into a little bit into more what are the different varieties, what are the different types of tea, we also made a course and where I talk about the different types: yellow tea, green tea, oolong tea, post-fermented tea, etc. And you can check this out. We also put the link below, and I thank you for watching. And if you ever have a question, don't hesitate to put your questions down below. We will try to answer all your questions. And until next time, see you and bye bye.